Hello guys, I am Shreyas Agnihotri and I started this channel named Historicity to be able to express historic tales and writings in the most visually appealing manner. And I chose Al-Biruni's Kitab-Ul-Hind because he was considered as one of the very first historians, or at least the people whose historic records were authentic and preserved. So let's dive in.
Philosophers and geometricians have divided the land of Hind into 9 unequal parts, giving to each a separate name. Its shape resembles the back of a crab on the surface of the water. The mountains and the plains in these 9 parts of India are extensive and occur one after the other in successive order. The mountains appear to stand near each other like the joints of the spine and extend through the inhabited world from the east to the midst of the west. Rivers flow at their base. One which comes from the south of India is very large and broad, but in other places they have their sources in the north, in the lofty mountains and in the deserts. Hind is surrounded on the east by China and Tibet, on the west by Iran and Kabul, and on the south by the sea. The river of the country of Hind, which flow from northern mountains, amount to 11. Those which flow from the eastern mountains amount to the same number. These run far to the east and to the south, till they fall into the ocean. Those, however, which rise in the south do not discharge themselves into the sea. The northern mountains have connections with Mount Meru, which lies south of them. Besides this, there is another lofty ridge of mountains intervening between Turkestan, Tibet, and Hind. Tibet and China appear red. The descent from its summit to Tibet is one prasang. This mountain is so high that Firdausi probably meant the following verse to apply to it. It is so low and so high, so soft and so hard, that you may see its belly from the fish on which the earth rests, its back from the moon. The inhabitants of Kashmir suffer greatly from their encroachments and depredations. The mountains here mentioned are those described in the translation of Al-Biruni, and they are as manifest as a tortoise displaying from the midst of the waters. The Hindus believe that the Ganga has its source in paradise, and descending to the earth is divided into 7 streams, the center one being denominated the Ganga. The nation of Hind can be divided into 3 climates. The western portion is in the third, the eastern in the first, but the chief portion of Hind is included in the second climate. Its central territory is called Madhya Desh, which means the middle land. The Persians call it Kanauj. It is called the Madhya Desh because it lies between the seas and the mountains, between the hot and the cold countries, and between the 2 extremities of west and east. It was the capital of the great haughty and proud despots of India. Sindh lies on the west of this territory. If anyone wishes to come from Nimroz, meaning the country of Sijistan, or Iran to this region, he will have to pass through Kabul. The city of Kanauj stands on the western bank of the Ganga. It was formerly a most magnificent city, but in consequence of its being deserted by its ruler, it has now fallen into neglect and ruin, and Bari, which is 3 days' journey from it on the eastern side of the Ganga, is now the capital. Kanauj is celebrated for the descendants of the Pandavas, as Mathura is on account of Vasudev. The river Jamuna lies in the east of this city, and there is a distance of 27 prasangs between the 2 rivers. The city of Thanesar is situated between the rivers, nearly 70 prasangs north of Kanauj and 50 prasangs from Mathura. The Ganga issues from its source called Gangadwar and waters many of the cities of India. In going from Mathura to Ujjain, you pass through several neighboring villages at no greater distance from one another than 5 prasangs. Kashmir is a valley surrounded by lofty inaccessible hills and broad deserts. From the mountain of Bhutasar to Kashmir, across the country of Tibet, is nearly 300 prasangs. The people of Kashmir do not ride on quadrupeds but are carried on men's shoulders in a katut, which resembles a throne. The servants of the government are always on the alert and watch the passes and strongholds of the country. The Sindh rises in the mountains of Amak on the borders of the Turkish country, passing by the mountains of Bilur and Shamalan. It rises in the east in 2 days' journey to the country of the Bhutavari Turks, from whose encroachments and depredations the Kashmirians suffer great distress. Whoever travels along the left bank of the river will find villages and towns which are close to one another on the south of the capital. Before entering on our exposition, we must form an adequate idea of that which renders it so perfectly difficult to penetrate to the essential nature of any Indian subject. The subject of these difficulties will either facilitate the work of our progress or serve as an apology for any shortcomings of ours. For the readers must always bear in the mind that the Hindus entirely differ from us Muslims in every respect, many a subject appearing intricate and obscure, which would be perfectly clear if there were more connections between us. The barriers which separate Muslims and Hindus rest on different causes. First, they differ from us in everything, which other nations might have in common. And here we first mention the language, although the differences of languages also exist between other nations. But in India, if you want to conquer this difficulty, you have to learn Sanskrit, because the language is of an enormous range both in words and inflections, something like the Arabic, calling one and the same thing by various names, both original and derived, and using one and the same word for a variety of subjects, which in order to be properly understood must be distinguished from each other by various qualifying epithets. Secondly, they totally differ from us in religion, as we believe in nothing in which they believe. On the whole, there is very little disputing about theological topics among themselves. At utmost they fight with words, but they will never stake their soul or body or their property on religious controversy. On the contrary, all their fanaticism is directed against those who don't belong to them, against all foreigners. They call the foreigners mlecha, meaning impure, and they forbid having any connection with the mlechas, be it a relation, eating together, drinking, or even sharing the same air at times. They think by doing any of these they will be polluted. They consider as impure anything which touches the fire and the water of a foreigner, and no household can exist without these two elements. Besides, they never desire that a thing which once has been polluted should be purified and thus recovered, as under ordinary circumstances if anybody or anything has become unclean, he or it would strive to regain the state of purity. In the third place, in all manners and usages, they differ from us to such a degree as to frighten their children with us, with our dress and our ways and customs, and as to declare us to be the devil's breed, and our doings as the very opposite of all that is good and proper. By the by, we must confess, in the order to be just, that a similar depreciation of foreigners not only prevails among us and the Hindus, but is common to all nations towards each other. Another circumstance which increased the already existing antagonism between Hindus and the foreigners is the Shamaniya Buddhists, who send their missionaries out of way to convert people to their faith. Though the Buddhist faith is very similar to the Hindu faith, yet the Brahmins and the Buddhists differ in many aspects. In former times, Khorasan, Persia, Iraq, Mosul, the country up to the frontier of Syria, was heavily influenced by Hindu and Buddhistic religion. But then Zarathustra went forth from Azerbaijan and preached a new faith, which is known as Zoroastrianism by many. Zoroastrianism dominated Persia, Iraq, Mosul, Baghdad up to the Arabian land for over 1,000-year period. But then came Islam. The Persian Empire perished and the repugnance of the Hindus against foreigners increased more and more when the Muslims began to make their inroads into their country. Things really did go wrong after Muhammad bin Qasim attacked Sindh and conquered it. When Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Multan, he inquired how the town had become so very flourishing and so many treasures had there been accumulated, and then he found out that this idol of a goddess was the cause, for there came pilgrims from all sides of Hind. Therefore, he thought it would be best to have the idol where it is, but he hung a piece of cow's flesh on its neck by way of mockery. On the same place, a mosque was built. When the Karmashians occupied Multan, Jalal ibn Shaiban, the usurper, broke the idol into pieces and killed its priest. The treatment met by the Hindus from Al-Qasim was not seen as a welcoming sign by the rest of the nation. All these events planted a deeply rooted hatred in their hearts against us Muslims. Now, in the following times, no Muslim conqueror passed beyond the frontier of Kabul and the river Sindh until the days of the Turks, when they seized the power in Ghazna under Shamani dynasty. The supreme power fell to the lot of Nasir ad-Dawla Sabuktajin. This prince chose holy war or jihad as his calling and therefore called himself Al-Ghazi. In the interest of his successors, he constructed in order to weaken the Indian frontier those roads on which afterwards his son Yamin ad-Dawla Mahmud marched into India during a 30-year period. God be merciful to both son and father. Mahmud utterly ruined the prosperity of India and performed their wonderful exploits by which Hindus became like atoms of dust scattered in all directions, and like a tale of old in the mouth of the people. Their scattered remains cherish, of course, the most inveterate aversions towards all Muslims. This is the reason to which Hindu sciences have retired far away from those parts of the country conquered by us and have fled to places which our hands cannot yet reach, to Kashmir, Banaras, and there the antagonism between them and all the foreigners receives more and more nourishment, both from political and religious sources. In the older times, the Hindu faith traveled across nations and reached all the way up to Greek and Romania, resulting in the heathen Greeks before the rise of Christianity holding same opinions and beliefs much as the Hindus. Their educated classes thought much as same as those of the Hindus. Their common people held the same idolatrous views as those of the Hindus. The Hindus believe with regard to God that He is one, eternal, without beginning and end, acting by free will, almighty, all-wise, living, giving, ruling, preserving, and who is, in His sovereignty, unique, beyond all likeliness and unlikeliness, and that He does not resemble anything, nor does anything resemble Him. In order to illustrate this, we shall produce some extracts from their literature. Out of all their literature, a book named Bhagavad Gita stands one of the most important. And now I'll quote one of the portions of Bhagavad Gita. Vasudev, or also known as Sri Krishna, is telling Arjuna, I am the universe without a beginning by being born, or without an end by dying. I do not aim by whatever I do at any recompense. I do not specially belong to one class of beings to the exclusion of others, as if I were the friend of one and the enemy of the others. I give to each one in my creation what is sufficient for him in all his functions. Therefore, whoever knows me in this capacity and tries to become similar to me by keeping desires apart from his action, his fetters will be loosened and he will easily be saved and free. Further, Vasudev speaks in the same book. It is desire that causes most men to take refuge with God for their wants. But if you examine their case closely, you will find that they are very far from having an accurate knowledge of Him. For God is not apparent to everyone, so that he might perceive him with his senses, therefore they do not know him. Some of them do not pass beyond what their senses perceive, some pass beyond this, but stop at the knowledge of the laws of nature, without learning that above them there is one who did not give birth nor was born, the essence of whose being has not been comprehended by the knowledge of anyone, while his knowledge comprehends everything. The Hindus consider the plants as a species of animal, meaning they believe that plants are also alive. This belief is not very common across the globe. Only the Greeks at the time of Plato had very similar thought. There is a possibility that this thought originated amongst the Hindus and then traveled across. According to the Hindus, the organs of the senses have been made for acquiring knowledge, and the pleasure which they afford has been created to stimulate people to research and investigation, as the pleasure which eating and drinking afford to the taste has created to preserve the individual by means of nourishment. So the pleasure of coitus serves to preserve the species by giving birth to new individuals. The Ved contains commandments and prohibitions, detailed statements about reward and punishment, intended to encourage and to deter, but most of it contains hymns of praise and treats of various kinds of sacrifices to the fire, which are so numerous and difficult that you could hardly count them. Ved means knowledge of what which was not known before. It is a religious system which, according to the Hindus, comes from God and is a constant pursuit of absolute truth. The Veds are not written down, as they are supposed to be chanted with a specific tone modulation, and Hindus believe that writing them down might corrupt them. The Veds are supposed to be taught by a guru to his student, and according to Hindus, this is an eternal lineage that shall go on forever. In consequence, it has happened that they have several times forgotten the Ved and lost it, for they maintain that the following passage occurs in the conversations between God and Brahman relating to the beginning of all things. According to the report of Saunak, who had received it from the planet Venus, you will forget the Ved at the time when the earth will be submerged. It will then go down to the depths of the earth, and none but the fish will be able to bring it out again. Therefore, I shall send the fish, and it will deliver the Ved into your hands. And I shall send the boar to raise the earth with its tusks and bring it out of the water. Further, the Hindus maintain that the Ved, together with all the rites of their religion and the country, had been obliterated in the last Dwapar Yuga, a period of a time which we shall speak in proper place, until it was renewed by Vyasa, the son of Parasar. The Vishnu Purana mentions, at the beginning of each Manvantara period, there will be created a new lord of a period whose children will rule over the whole earth, and a prince who will be head of the world, and angels to whom men will bring fire offerings, and great bear who will renew the Veda which is lost at the end of each period. Now we shall talk about the sciences of Hindus. Of all the sciences of the world, be it medicine, mathematics, astronomy, or architecture, Hindus have made huge advancements in all of them. Of all the sciences, the science of astronomy is the most famous among them, since the affairs of their religion are in various ways connected with it. If a man wants to gain the title of an astronomer, he must not only know the scientific mathematical astronomy, but also astrology. It's very common for them to have long debates about the heavenly bodies. They have developed many kinds of scientific theorems known to be inscribed in books called Siddhants. They have 5 major Siddhants. The first and the most well known is Surya Siddhant by Varaha Mihir. The second is Vasishtha Siddhant, so called from one of the stars of the Great Bear, composed by Vishnu Chandra. The third is Paulisa Siddhant by Yavan Acharya Paulisa. The fourth is Romaka Siddhant, comprising works of Romans, and the fifth is Brahma Siddhant by Brahmagupta. Varaha Mihir has composed an astronomical handbook of small compass called Panch Siddhantika, which name ought to mean that it contains the pith and marrow of the preceding 5 Siddhants. Now we shall talk about the discussion done by Brahmagupta in his work Brahma Siddhant. The first chapter talks about the nature of globe and other heavenly bodies. The second chapter talks about the revolutions of planets and their calculations, and the third chapter talks about the correction of the places of the planets and so forth. He also talks about the lunar solar eclipses, latitudes and longitudes of different planets. The Hindus cultivate numerous other branches of science and literature and have a nearly boundless literature. I, however, could not comprehend it with my knowledge. I wish I could translate the book Panchatantra into Persian and Arabic, but thus far they are beyond my understanding. The Hindus begin their books with Om, the word symbolizing origin of all universe. The Hindus call the universe Brahmand. Yavanacharya Paulisa says in his Siddhant, the Brahmand is the sum of earth, water, fire, wind and heaven. The latter has created behind the darkness. It appears to the eyes as blue because it is not reached by the rays of the sun and not illuminated by them like the watery non-igneous globes. Example, the bodies of the planets and of the moon. When the rays of the sun fall upon and the shadow of the earth does not reach them, their darkness disappears and their figures become visible in the night. The light giver is only one, the sun, and all the others receive light from him. Brahmand means egg of Brahma and implies that the universe is spherical in shape. All five major Acharya, Brahmagupta, Paulisa, Aryabhat, Varahamihir and Vishnu Chandra agree that the earth is round, and they argue that if the earth were not round, then the nights and the days would have been the same, the summers and the winters would have been the same, the latitudes and longitudes would have been different from what they are now. Brahmagupta says in the first chapter of his work Brahma Siddhant, where he enumerates the heavens, placing the moon the nearest heaven to earth, the other planets in the following ones, and Saturn in the seventh. The Hindus believe that the knowledge is endless and it's necessary to know only what is essential for us humans. In the support of this philosophy, the followers of Aryabhat say, it is sufficient for us to know the space which is reached by the solar rays. We do not want the space which is not reached by the solar rays. Though it be in itself of an enormous extent, that which is not reached by the rays is not reached by the perception of our senses, and that which is not reached by the perception of our senses is not knowledge.